Welcome to another episode of the Hospice Redefined podcast. My name is Rachel and I'm your host. I've been a hospice nurse for years now, and I've been privileged enough to sit with patients at their end of life. Sometimes it's days, sometimes it's weeks, sometimes it's months, and even years. We've gotten to know our families, and we've experienced our own personal grief. If you're still living and breathing, you have likely experienced loss of some kind. The holidays can really bring that loss to the surface. It can be felt even more acutely as we experience the memories of our loved ones and how they experience the holidays with us. For me, when I come home to my parents' house and I see the empty chair where my dad once sat, I think of him calling me by his nickname, Mike. He used to call me that. I think of his joy whenever he would see me come home from college or wherever I was. And then I think of him cooking the meal. He always made the exact same meal for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter. We try with our big family to emulate that meal, but it's never quite as good as it was when he made it. His loss is felt so acutely during that time. And if you've lost someone, you know what I'm talking about. Throughout this episode, you're going to hear from Carrie, John, and Jamie. They have experience in hospice care. They've also all experienced personal loss. Our hope with this episode is that you will leave with a little bit of hope, some tools, some understanding, and the ability to know how to navigate this season. We don't want you to be anything than you are. We want you to feel all the feelings that come up. Grief is a difficult journey. We want you to know that there is hope to be found. Thank you so much for being here. Let's lean in and let's experience this time together. Welcome to Hospice Redefined. This is the podcast where we uncover the true purpose of hospice care and empower caregivers, families, and healthcare professionals with practical tools, compassionate support, and valuable insights. Let's face it, hospice is often misunderstood. It's viewed as an ending or a sign of giving up. But in reality, hospice is about life, living with dignity, comfort, and meaningful connection during one of life's most profound transitions. I'm your host, Rachel Carta, a registered nurse with experience in hospice care. Alongside of an incredible team of hospice professionals, we're here to shift the narrative and provide support to the caregivers who are really in the trenches. Whether you're one of those caregivers, a healthcare professional, or someone curious, or even if you're uncertain about hospice, this is the podcast for you. Let's redefine hospice care together, one conversation at a time.
So at our support group meetings, I've had a lot of people talk about how they really are dreading the holidays coming up. That's always a very difficult time for people. A message that I keep trying to convey to everybody is that it's not something you can avoid. You can't ignore the holidays. They're everywhere. Every commercial on TV, everywhere you go, the holidays are out there. So trying to think that you can ignore them, avoid the holidays, it's just not real feasible. But a lot of people worry about they have to put on a happy face or they have to act a certain way when they're when they're with their family during the holidays, and they're dreading it. So one way that I feel that to get around all that is to do something where you honor your loved one, and that might be a way to kind of help break the ice in the situation. Honoring a deceased loved one during the holidays can help provide a sense of connection for you as well. Like, there's so many different things you could do. You could set out a plate, prepare a dish for your loved one. You could share a story, you could have other people share a story, and I would argue that it might actually break the ice for everybody else around you too, because people generally do not know how to act around you. I hear this all the time too at the support groups, that not even during the holidays, just in general, after a loved one dies, one of the things that really people have a hard time with is how other people act around them. They don't know what to say, they say the dumbest things sometimes, like that's just how it goes. Like, we'll say something like, anything you need, I can do. Well, what I need is my loved one back. Like, so saying things like that, it's not always helpful. So I feel if you do something like this at the holidays, honor your loved one, it can make them feel at peace and comfort as well, and it just make the whole experience better for everybody. So I'll give you an example from my own life. About 6 years ago, my wife's brother, Rick, he had brain cancer, and it was a long, drawn-out ordeal. It was bad, and he died in about November. Okay, he had his wife, and he has 2 daughters, and at the time, I think they were around 12 or 16, which of course that's a tough age anyway. So in every year, Rick was to back up on him a little bit. He was a larger-in-life type presence about him. He was always the one that frankly kind of drove me nuts with some of the get-togethers that we'd have. He always made a big deal. Like Christmas was a big deal. He was bringing stuff to the house. We really had one heck of a celebration whenever Rick was around. But no one even wanted to do it because he wasn't going to be there. So anyway, we did manage to talk his wife and the 2 daughters to come for our traditional Christmas dinner thing that we did with extended family members. And I was dreading it myself. I was nervous. I didn't want to go through it. I was worried, it's going to be awkward, all that stuff that I'm talking about the way people feel in this situation. It was affecting me too, selfishly. So anyway, so fast forward, we're there, and you could tell no one wants to be there. The wife was miserable. The kids were like, no one wanted to be there. They were just missing Rick something awful, and it just felt weird. Well, my wife then, God bless her, she comes out with this pie, okay? She came out with a pie that was Rick's favorite. It's like a peanut butter pie with a Fifth Avenue bars worked into it and stuff. I'm telling you, this pie is to die for. But I didn't realize she made it. She made it. She comes out, and everybody knew right away. That was, because Rick talked about it every single year. Are you making that pie? Are you making that pie? And she came out with it, and everybody at first kind of looked like, oh, what is she doing? And she says, I did this to honor Rick. I mean, that's kind of how she put it. I needed to do this for myself. I'm having a hard time myself, and I just thought that we should all enjoy a piece of pie that Rick loves so much. And I'm telling you, from that point on, that got everybody loosened everything up. First of all, people got emotional about it, and they started talking, about because this was like a 3-year journey with Rick. This was really hard on everybody. But it got everybody talking, and everybody was eating the pie, and that's where I feel like honoring someone helps to validate feelings. Like, you need to you can't avoid the holidays. You can't pretend. I'm a social worker. I always say it's better to try to talk about stuff. I always tell people, I don't know much about anything other than the fact that you can't do this stuff alone. You can't isolate. You got to talk to people. You got to turn to your support system. And this is an example of how you can deal with that elephant in the room type syndrome. You can do something to honor a loved one during the holidays, and it might not just help you, it'll help everybody around you. And that is why I think that honoring someone, your loved ones, is a great idea.
Well, to tag along on John's story, I have my own story. 4 years ago, my husband passed away, and we're coming up to the anniversary actually this month. And one of the stories that I have about honoring my husband, he always loved the shortbread cookies from Tasty Cake in that little cardboard tub. And growing up, he and his mom at Christmas time everyone else would go to bed, and it would just be him and his mom drank coffee from morning to night. And she would pour a cup of coffee for him, pour a cup of coffee for her. And it was the only time he'd drink coffee. They'd bring out the cookies, and the 2 of them would just spend time eating cookies and drinking coffee. Dunking, probably more for my husband when he was young. And to be honest, he was never a coffee drinker. But when he told me that story, I started doing that with us. The night I would put up our Christmas tree, whether he was home or not, he wouldn't be part of that because he loved the surprise of what the Christmas tree in the living room would look like. So I would call him out, and I would have the coffee brewed, and I would have the cookies. And we started doing that. And that became a tradition that I carried on after he passed. In fact, at his memorial, we did that we did a coffee and cookie toast. And I shared that story with others, and there was a support group that I ran, and they actually took that story and ran with it and got the shortbread cookies and the coffee. And as a community, this senior high-rise, they shared that together to remind them that it's okay to honor those that they've lost before. See, losing someone you love around the holidays or having to go through the first set of holidays without them is incredibly difficult. A lot of times our holidays are focused around a person that we've lost. For me, my husband loved Christmas. He died a week before Thanksgiving, which was my favorite holiday. And his death was not a long, drawn-out process. It was less than a month from the time he got sick with COVID to the time he passed. So I didn't have the long, tough experience that a lot of people go through in the process. And it was kind of a shock to all of us. And Thanksgiving was something that we held every year at our house since we bought our house in 2016 in Williamsport. And I love Thanksgiving because it's not about the gifts. It really is about presents with your friends and family and some really fattening, yummy foods. Who doesn't love that? But I realized very quickly that Thanksgiving was not going to be my favorite holiday that year, especially. I could barely form sentences, let alone think about creating a feast for my family. And I sure didn't want to think about him not sitting at that space in the table, and I didn't want to look at an empty seat, and I didn't want anyone else sitting in that seat. I got on the phone and in full hysterical crying, called my mom. And I said, Mom, I can't have Thanksgiving here. I can't do it. And she said, let's have it here at our house. So that's what we did. We went down to Mom's house, and it was a somber kind of, everyone was a little bit somnolent, sad, probably a little bit of eggshells, but we were all grieving together. My stepson and his wife had lost, his dad and father-in-law. My parents had lost a son-in-law. I had lost my husband. We were all in this together, but we spent the time together. We changed it. Sometimes you have to adapt and change traditions. Sometimes you're creating new traditions. We had a beautiful time together. We shared a lot of stories. There were tears at the table, and it was okay. It was good. It was healing. And it got us through that first holiday. Now keep in mind, when I talk about my honoring tradition of Bill, it's all about Christmas. He loved Christmas. He especially loved to go out and take time going out and seeing the lights. We lived in Williamsport. Ever hear of Candy Cane Lane? Like, we were always there. And then there's Rudolph's Runway out in Linden. We loved doing that. And he and I would go together. And that was one of the nights that we would take, just going out and checking out the Christmas lights. And we were no longer able to do that together. So that first Christmas, my parents picked me up. And we grabbed hot chocolate and we did it together, just the three of us. And we made that our new thing. So now it's Mom and Dad and I. And I have remarried. I did move on from the single life, not from grief. Grief, you never leave. And it never leaves you, unfortunately. You now have that piece of your heart that's always feeling missing. Sometimes you just have to figure out ways that you can adapt. I will say adapt and overcome, because my current husband is a Navy man, and that's the phrase for the Navy SEALs, adapt and overcome. But the facts are you can adapt and overcome. You can change traditions. You can make new ones. You can honor your loved one. And you can find ways to make those holidays joyous again. You don't feel like celebrating that Christmas? I didn't want to put up a Christmas tree. I didn't want to do anything but the bare minimum. But my son and daughter-in-law, who were living with us at the time, one day they came up and said, okay, we're putting up the tree. You can help us. You can stay in the room, whatever you want to do. And they put up the tree. And I said, I think I'm going to go in the other room. And that year, they brought me the cookies and coffee when they called me out to see the tree. Whatever you need to do to get through the holidays, it's okay. But like John said, you can't ignore them. They're going to be there. Don't isolate. There's people who love you and care about you. And what I always used to tell people is, you invite me, I may come. But expect me to flake out a little. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. It's going to hurt. You're going to grieve. It's going to bring back memories. Sweet, bittersweet, bad. But you're going to get through it. I can promise you that. would help me, faith, family, and friends. Relying on those to help you get through. Let them carry you through. Adapt and overcome. You're going to make it. And I say that from experience.
For those who are grieving, holidays and anniversaries associated with your loved one can be especially hard. Acknowledging the challenge of facing these days does not make a potentially difficult time any easier. But preparing for them with helpful coping strategies may provide some much needed comfort. One of the things that I've learned as a bereavement coordinator is that grief is a unique experience for each individual, and there are no clear timetables for grief. In addition, there's no concrete pain or relief. Grief can be exhausting mentally, physically, emotionally, and you need to replenish your energy by spending time alone or with others. When my mother was diagnosed with a stroke, our whole world changed. Eventually, she was admitted to hospice, and I had a lot to learn. I did not live near my parents, and so I set up a visitation time of visiting once a month. And I know visits were going to be different. So one of the tips or gifts that I would like to give to you to help you cope with holidays is using the word expectations. One of the things that I started to do when I would plan a visit was I would make a mental or actual, sometimes a physical list of things that I would like to do or help with or enjoy when I was visiting with my mom. And once I had that list prepared, then I would look it over and I would pare it down to 2 or 3 items on that list. And I found that that was one of the best things that I did, because when I returned home after visiting with my mom, I always felt glad that I was able to go, and I felt like my expectations were met. Where if I had a list of 5 to 10 things on there and didn't get them all accomplished or have them happen, then I knew that I would have been disappointed. My mother's ability to talk, it changed as her disease process progressed. At first we could have conversations and enjoy them. And later on, she could not talk hardly at all. And so when I visited, I would always, like, whatever she would say, if we were able to have a little bit of a conversation, I would feel like my expectations were met. If I could help her, that was another one that I would go there to help. And if I was able to help, I would always come back feeling really glad that I was able to make that trip and help out. I have heard that it's said that expectation is just a disappointment that hasn't happened yet. And expectations are at an all-time high during holidays. And especially this month, as we look forward to Thanksgiving, your expectations for time with family, friends, may be set really high. And I encourage you to think about it and lower your expectations. There are also many uncertainties. This might be the first Thanksgiving holiday, and holidays coming up after that you have not had your loved one. So you're not sure what's going to happen during time with family and friends, or if you would even get an invitation. So all of those uncertainties play in our minds. So it's really good to start planning ahead on how you're going to cope and things that you can do. Go through, like, what are your expectations and see how you can pare them down to a smaller, shorter list that you know are events or things that can happen. Expectations are all about change, and change changes some of our traditions, change in some of our plans. One definition of grief is the natural and normal response to change and loss. So you're not only grieving the missing your loved one, but you're also grieving the fact that your holidays are never going to be the same. And so it's all about what we choose. Don't think that you can't have a great holiday by planning ahead, by lowering your expectations, by developing new traditions. You can have a wonderful enjoyment these next 2 months, and maybe your goal should be that you will have and experience some joy. Part of expectations is reframing the upcoming events to think of some new things that you can do, or including some traditions from the past. So I encourage you to plan ahead for a joyful holiday. Find some new traditions that you can incorporate in, lower your expectations, and make some new choices so that you can have a joyful and wonderful time with family and friends.
Thank you for being here for another episode of Hospice Redefined. I hope you found so much value in today's episode. Navigating the holidays can be so challenging. I hope you've taken something that you've learned from either John, Jamie, or Carrie, and you can take that and apply it to your own life. Take a moment to take a deep breath, breathe in your experience. Everything we go through in our lives makes us who we are and will become. Allow this moment and these things that you've learned to help you to figure out what is going to support me the best over the next weeks and months during this season. We thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hospice Redefined. We see you, we hear you, and we're so glad that you're a part of this community. Please visit hospiceredefined.com to find our free caregiving guide and to keep updated on all of the latest podcast episodes. If you know someone who's interested in hospice, or maybe they're curious, or maybe there's someone who needs it for their family, please share this episode with them. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.